Welcome back to Financial Fortitude Podcast, where we help high earners, families, and business owners build wealth with intention, not just accumulation.
And today's episode is going to be a little more personal because we're talking about mistakes.
Not theory, not textbook strategies, but real-life financial mistakes we made in our 20s and 30s, and more importantly, what those mistakes actually cost us.
And if you're in your 20s and 30s right now, this episode could quite literally save you years of frustration and potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And if you're past that stage, this is about pressure testing your current strategy and making sure you're not still carrying forward habits that don't serve you anymore. Welcome to Financial Fortitude, a podcast for high earners, families, and business owners. We're your hosts, Michael Acosta
and Brady Hemmerly. Each week, we bring purpose-driven financial guidance to you so you can be assured you're on the right path. If you're looking to become an extraordinary wealth builder, let's dive in. Michael, I'm excited about this episode because I think it's going to be a mix of personal feedback, or at least personal experiences that you and I have had, and then the experiences that we observe, I would say countless times for clients who are sitting somewhere between 20 and 40, right? What mistakes or kind of pitfalls are we seeing that people typically fall into? What impacts can it have long term? And then perhaps what have you and I done both wrong and right along the way that we can speak to and make things a little more personal? So excited.
Yeah, I'm excited also. And I think this is where we get to be a little bit more vulnerable in nature with the podcast, right? Because there will be moments where we're sharing some of our financial mistakes or bad decisions that we've made along the way, but more importantly, highlighting what we're seeing across generations, right? People in their 20s, people in their 30s, and people in their 40s. And I'd say the first 30 years of your career is probably the most powerful from a compounding effect standpoint early on, just getting the systems in place and finding that accelerated traction to help you build wealth at a faster pace.
So it's funny you say that because we're going to jump right into this. The first mistake that we have on paper is all about time. So talk to us more about what you have seen as one of the bigger or perhaps biggest mistakes that many young clients make when it comes to how they're attacking their financial plan.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of young professionals, young families, young business owners make the mistake that time is on their side, right? Very often we will say, well, you have a long time horizon, so you can do this, that, and the other. Or there will be plenty of time for that. Well, the one thing that's not guaranteed and not promised in life is time. We don't know when our time here on this earth will come to an end, but it's often, okay, well, I will be making more money later, so I can always catch up. And, we have to ask, will you? Will you catch up? Because I don't know if that's always the case. And that really ties into some of our student loan repayment strategies when consulting with doctors, dentists who have six-figure in student loan debt. It's like, okay, well, we can try to be as aggressive as, your directors were telling you or your mentors with paying this off and delaying investing. But mathematically, do you end up in the same place, if not worse outcome, versus if you would have started saving and investing along the way?
Yeah, so I think to echo on that, oftentimes the comments that I hear is, hey, I'm going to start investing or I'm going to get more serious about investing once my income rises. I'm going to take my 20s and 30s and really use this as time to just figure things out. And there's absolute power, right, in using your younger years to figure out what direction that you're headed, what passions do you have, where do you fit best in the workplace. But amid all of that, whether it be just confusion or all of that uncertainty of figuring what life is going to look like out, the biggest true mistake that we see is saying, hey, I'm going to put a pure pause on investing altogether. Investing even little by little in your 20s and 30s because the compounding nature of time has such a big impact that even a little bit in those years can make a huge impact much later.
And loss compounding is irreversible in nature because it's not linear. It's actually exponential. And so there are moments I will go against what you just mentioned where, for some people it might make sense to pause contributions towards retirement and towards investing just to get their financial household in order. But in greater theme, yes, delaying, pausing is going to derail some of your success. And we ran a scenario looking at, a household earning $250,000 saving 20% of their annual gross income, so $50,000 a year across short-term, mid-term, and long-term buckets. Another way of saying that is, investments held outside of retirement as well as investments held in retirement. And let's just assume an 8% weighted average return over the course of 30 years in a vacuum. Well, that output, $50,000 each year growing at 8%, comes out to about $6.1 million. If we delay investing by 10 years, so if we don't start at age 30 and we begin investing at age 40, well, 20 years, we're looking at an output of about 2.47 million. So again, just to summarize that, I start working, I'm making good money in my 30s. From 30 to 60, I'm saving $50,000 a year growing at 8%. The output's 6.1 million. If I delay investing that $50,000 that's growing at 8% until age 40, and I still stop at age 60, my output is only 2.47 million. That's a sizable difference.
Yeah, a $4 million difference, right? That's the difference between hundreds of thousands of dollars of retirement income, your ability to perhaps retire a spouse early or retire both of you early. It's pretty impactful. And I think the takeaway here is that $50,000 savings figure, it's a big number, but that same mathematical equation works at essentially any level of savings, whether it's $5,000 a year or $50,000 a year. That compounding nature of time and the power of compound interest makes a huge effect on the back end because you can't buy that time back from a compounding standpoint.
Yeah, and I would say where we see this mistake happen most is probably going to be with our medical professional clients who have spent so much time in training, making very minimal income, right? Overworked, underpaid, while they're in residency and fellowship. And when they get that huge hit of income, that's when the lifestyle creep happens. Right.
So let's talk about that. It's almost a perfect segue into our next biggest mistake. It's this idea of lifestyle creep. So talk to us more. What is lifestyle creep and where do you see it manifest most often, especially from a mistake standpoint?
Yeah, I would say that it manifests the most when we have this idea of, well, I deserve this, so I can do it. I deserve to have this. I deserve to go on this trip. I've been training for so long. I've been studying for so long. I've been working so hard. I deserve to have this. And that's fair. I think that's a fair statement. I'm not telling you to not enjoy life. But the problem is that there's this misalignment in that just because your income grows doesn't necessarily mean that your wealth is going to just immediately increase as well or continue to grow, at the same percentage point. If you get a 3% raise, it doesn't mean your wealth is going to grow by 3%. If you allow your lifestyle, your desires to manifest and overtake your saving habits, well, it doesn't matter that you got that 3% raise. It was all absorbed by your lifestyle, your spending habits. That's all lost opportunity, right? That's a conversation you're going to have with your future self when you end up with the 2.4 million instead of the 6.1 million output. So the idea here is that, okay, well, how do you combat it? Well, you combat it by having systems that work, automation that works, integrating a wealth building account or a wealth coordination account, putting that surge protector in place, and honestly creating awareness around what your lifestyle actually looks like. Again, I'm all for splurging. We've had episodes, where we've talked about when the math doesn't matter. The output down the road may not matter depending on what your situation and circumstances look like today. But it's finding that balance between the short term and the long term and having that prudence to understand that, okay, well, if I'm getting a 3% raise, maybe I only need to increase my lifestyle by 1%.
And I think the key here is just being intentional or purpose-driven. When you decide to increase your lifestyle, is there a rhyme, reason, or true purpose that's actually driving that increase? Or is that lifestyle increase happening just because we don't have the right systems in place or we haven't really had that conversation with our present self and our future self? Right? This is very often where we see high earners. What do they do best is they just become high spenders at this point. As you mentioned, just because I'm making notably more money doesn't mean my wealth is increasing notably right alongside of it. And what does this tend to lead to for many clients then in their 40s, their 50s, and approaching retirement? It's feeling that trap, right? As my fixed expenses or my comfort-based lifestyle expenses have risen to a certain degree, perhaps too fast, I haven't been able to capture wealth for however many years that I've experienced this lifestyle creep. And now just to support my normal life day to day, I have to keep working, right? I'm basically handcuffed to the job that I have or more primarily to the income that I'm creating because any change to my lifestyle now feels like a notable step backwards. I'm stuck here.
Yeah, and I'd say one of the main goals or objectives that a lot of these younger households come into conversations with us with is I want to have the financial flexibility to exit the workforce on my terms when I'm ready, whether that's age 50, 55, 60, 62, 65, right? I think far and few between folks want to work until they're age 67 or 70. And if you are beholden to your lifestyle because you're keeping up with the Joneses, or, you're making, $500,000 or $900,000 a year as a physician family, husband and wife, you're probably hanging out with people who probably make similar amounts of income. And when you do that, guess what? They might have a higher lifestyle than you. So if you're hanging out with them, you're going to be pressured to spend money in ways that you might not normally spend, right? And I think that's where it becomes a slippery slope. And like you mentioned, a golden handcuff of sorts. And so there is a big difference between enjoying life versus financing a lifestyle. And our whole belief system is that you should get to enjoy your life, but not at the expense of trapping yourself into a career that you may or may not want to do for the next 20, 25, 30 years, right? Don't just do it because you feel like you have to. Do it because you actually feel called to do it.
Or not having the ability to jump at that new exciting opportunity. We see that just as often too, is, hey, I'm working in a high income position to support this high spending lifestyle that I've built. I've got this wonderful opportunity to go do something that I'm passionate about, to go explore a new career path, perhaps to go explore a startup type of opportunity. But I can't take a step backwards because I haven't designed my life that way. So mistake number one is really delaying getting started from a wealth building and investing standpoint. Mistake number two kind of goes hand in hand with that. It's financing my lifestyle today. And really what the trade-off is investing less or really building a lifestyle system less than what my future may actually require. And I think it all goes hand in hand with mistake number three that we see most often. And you kind of alluded to it here just a few moments ago. It's all about systems. So talk to us more about what this mistake typically looks like and how clients can begin to think differently if they're in that position where, hey, I don't have a system. I have experienced lifestyle creep and I haven't started investing yet.
Yeah, so I would even say that it's maybe even more than not having a system, and it's probably not having clarity with automation. And so not enough people have taken the time to truly peel back the onion and see what really is happening mechanically with their cash flow and their earnings. Most people will often be unaware of what's actually being withheld from their paychecks as far as the benefits that they've elected, let alone what subscriptions that they've signed up for months or years ago that they're not even using anymore, but they're just used to having it on auto pay and it's coming out of their accounts or being applied to credit cards, and we just pay it because we get so busy with life. But taking time to actually audit what's coming in, what's flowing out, and is there money left over, I think is powerful in itself, even if you just do it once a quarter or once every 6 months. But if you're going to do it more frequently, you can then set up automations that will, as close as possible, do it for you, right? And this is where we've had episodes where we talk about our wealth building account strategy or surge protectors, right? You take all of your household income, you isolate it into a single account. It can be a checking account, but the idea is that this account is not something that's directly tied into auto pays, credit card payments, or just lifestyle spend. It's really just a holding tank. It's a hub. Well, if you know that, okay, well, as a household earning $250,000 a year, you guys are spending, let's just call it for simple math, I don't know, $8,000 a month. And after taxes, you're bringing home somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 a month. Well, there's money left over. So the idea is that, okay, well, if I know that I only need 8, but 12 to 15 is being deposited into my wealth building account, well, I now have discretionary cash flow that's organically going to accumulate in that wealth building account, because every time I get paid, or at least once a month, I'm moving $8,000 from that wealth building account into my actual spending account, my actual checking account. And that's the account that you live your life out of, that you set up your subscriptions through, that you pay your credit card off of, all while that delta, or the difference between what hit the wealth building account and what got moved over to your spending account, that excess is just building up. So having that automation, that's why 401k contributions and 403b plan contributions work so well for society, because it's out of sight, out of mind. And you're ultimately trying to replicate that in a non-retirement account infrastructure.
What I'm hearing here is the system is essentially helping scale what is the two mistakes that we had first talked about, right? Having a system in place makes it much easier to begin saving and continue saving on an automated rather than a manual basis. Having a system in place allows you to better control what lifestyle creep looks like when you decide to spend more from a purpose-driven standpoint. And the entire system helps scale your wealth building up as your income naturally increases, as you're getting raises, bonuses, stepping into new roles, etc. Now, my question, Michael, is if someone has set up a system and they are actually capturing in their coordination or surge protector account, they're capturing some sum of money each month. Where's the power, or what's the power in that? How does that benefit someone, or where's the real value there?
So I guess two things before I jump into that. One is that I failed to mention that, yes, the automation for scalability is powerful, but if you aren't saving the right amount, if you don't know what your actual savings rate is, then I won't say it's all for nothing, because something's better than nothing, right? You're doing something in an appropriate manner. But setting a savings rate target is what's important on top of that automation. So again, we're talking about extraordinary wealth building status, 15 to 20% of your annual gross income. So I would say, one, having that automation, the money build up in that wealth building account, that surge protector, that wealth coordination account, whatever title you want to give it, the real power from a scalability standpoint is that as you start to see this number grow month over month as you're finding success and living within your lifestyle means, you can actually start to go to work and move larger sums of dollars into investment vehicles on a recurring basis. So this becomes cash flow automation planning 2.0 as opposed to 101. Once we've actually started to accrue the excess cash flow in that wealth building account, now it's okay, let's go to the next 200 level and let's start automating this and putting this to where we're maxing out our Roth IRA each year. We're putting a recurring contribution into a joint non-retirement investment account. We're funding a separate account for future down payment on a new home because we're going to level up. We're having a family. We're growing our family, so we need to buy a bigger home. Or maybe you're funding your vacation fund. Or maybe you're funding your gifting for the year from a philanthropic perspective, right? The idea is that as this starts to scale, you can do more with it in a more powerful and meaningful way. And then this is where you allow compounding interest and time value of money to work for you based on the amount of market risk that you're willing to accept.
Yeah, what I'm hearing here and what I've seen with many clients that we work with on a more frequent basis is once the system is in place and once everything is automated and clients can truly see, hey, what am I actually capturing each month? Is it on target? It makes it much easier to have those purpose-driven conversations because every single month we know exactly how much money is getting captured and where it's getting sent off to and why. And it's very easy to begin to tangibly say, hey, this is the next, the best, the highest use from a purpose standpoint of the dollars that I have and I'm investing and I'm saving. When there's not a lot of clarity as to what our financial picture looks like day to day, week to week, month to month, it's hard to focus on the most important things because we're always getting lost in the mix of, hey, we've just got to make sure we cover things before next month flips over or the credit card cycle changes again.
Yeah, and again, discipline can fail over time, or you take anyone who's ever done any sort of strict dieting, right? Any sort of strict protocol. Over time, there are temptations to overspend, to fall back into old habits, to relapse, if you will. So by having the systems in place and the automations, it almost holds you more accountable, right? But I would also say in working with a financial advisor, that also holds you accountable as well.
Let's jump into next big mistake we see. Number one was not getting started early enough. Number two is letting lifestyle creep take over. Number three was not having the systems in place, basically relying on discipline. What is another big risk that you see many younger clients make where impact doesn't always show up day to day?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of ignoring risk or just mismanaging risk altogether. So yeah, we will often meet with young professionals, right, whether they're in their 20s or their 30s or in their early 40s. And whenever we're talking about risk management, there's different levels of interest. Right, the younger you are, there tends to be less interest in it. Why? Because talking about protecting your ability to earn income and protecting your future earnings is really not relevant in your mind because you're young and healthy and invincible, right? But also it's boring. What is exciting about protection? Nothing, right? Until you actually need it. Then it's very exciting. And then you wish you had more than you actually had. So I'd say mismanaging risk, thinking that you're invincible and that nothing bad can happen to you because everyone else's story is their story, not your story, I think is one of the big mistakes that a lot of professionals, business owners, and families make along the way.
So let's talk further about that, because I know a number of our listeners are in the medical space. So how does this apply more specifically to resident and early physician, someone in their 20s, 30s, who spent a lot of their career up to this point just studying and training?
It's relevant to them by either not having the right amount of coverages, specifically personal long-term disability insurance, but that's really applicable across all occupation classes. So if we're going to really just hone in, though, and go narrow and deep with the medical professionals, I would say it's being too reliant on just group coverage from a long-term disability standpoint, which we all know is not nearly as strong as personal long-term disability insurance with a true on-occupation definition of what it means to be totally disabled, and feeling as though they cannot afford to pay $50, $75, or $100 a month in order to go and get some supplemental coverage, even if it's not the full amount of coverage that they should have while they're in training. Again, there's a balance, because for those individuals, they're being overworked and underpaid. They're making the least amount of income they're probably going to make in their entire working career as a medical professional. If something happens to them while in training, they never make it to the race. They never make it to the actual party where they're making, $300, $400, $500 plus $1,000 a year. And so if that's the case, they're going to be reliant on either working a job that's going to pay them significantly less, assuming it's not a total disability that keeps them out of just all occupational classes, or they're going to have to, be okay living off of their group disability benefit for the rest of their life, at least until Social Security benefits kick in. Well, Social Security benefits are probably not going to be great because they didn't have a long career earning high income. So I would say it's the underinsured, but also feeling as though, even as a medical professional, that you're uninvincible, right? But underinsured also from the sense of liability insurance, right? Whether you have an umbrella insurance or not, whether you have adequate liability insurance on your auto policy or your home insurance policy if you own a home, or life insurance, right? The best time to buy insurance in general is when you're younger and you're healthier. Even if you don't feel like you will necessarily need it in that moment, there could be probable cause for you to go ahead and lock in some terms and some rates for that specific time frame of your life.
Similar to our investment mistake up above, not getting started early enough, there is a protection mistake, right? There's a cost to waiting. As you get older and perhaps get less healthy, just based on the lifestyle that you're living, the cost of insurance that you may very much want or need in the future may rise or really be not available to you at that time, which can significantly impact planning thereafter. So big risk is just going notably underprotected or not considering the financial immune system as part of the entire financial conversation when you're building a plan. As important as it is to get started investing, as important as it is to save like an extraordinary wealth builder, it's also important to understand, hey, my financial immune system is protecting all of these other things. I need to investigate where those gaps, tumors, broken bones, all of those things look like.
Absolutely.
So let's jump into what I would consider the last mistake, perhaps before you and I get a little more vulnerable. It's all about, I would say, the DIY approach and this concept of buying back time. So talk to us more about what this typically looks like with clients that we're meeting with, and then we'll segue into, hey, what are some of the mistakes that you and I have made that we'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I would say that it's, in this one, the DIYers, it's really a matter of being overconfident, not only in your abilities, but also probably with your bandwidth or capacity, right? We believe, and we've mentioned it on multiple episodes in the past, that not every single person may need to work with a financial advisor. Some people have the bandwidth and the capacity to go and do the research and manage it themselves, or they may have overly simplistic situations to where they're just okay with that, right? They don't have anything complex or sophisticated, and that's fine. But as your circumstances evolve, and as your wealth compounds, I think that there does become a point where shifting from DIYing to outsourcing with trusted professionals becomes prudent. And whether it's, hey, you now have multiple business income streams, you're going to have multiple business tax filings plus a personal filing. This is a little more complex than I want it to be, so let me go ahead and outsource this to a trusted CPA or tax filing professional. Or, hey, I've now gotten to the point to where I'm about to retire And I knew how to manage my cash flow when I was earning income. But now that my cash flow is going to stop by way of my working efforts because I'm no longer going to be employed, I don't know how to actually create income for myself based off the wealth that I've created. Right? This is where you could work with a financial advisor that specializes in income distribution planning. You could probably most certainly read books, study, leverage AI, search the web, and figure out your own strategy. But it only takes one mistake to make a significant dent in your financial situation, or create a legal issue for yourself, or a tax withholding issue for yourself with the IRS, where it's like, hey, I probably should have just paid a little bit of money and had somebody else do this for me. And it's a matter of how much do you actually value your time. That was honestly a hard concept for me to stomach early on in becoming a business owner and starting my practice, because I was in a scarcity mindset of wanting to try to reduce my overall fees over and over and over again. But then when I had this mental shift of, okay, well, it's going to take me twice as long as someone who does this day in and day out, and they're going to be more competent in this area than I am, I will just hand this over to them, pay the fee, and use that extra time to either make memories with my family or go be more productive in my business, which hopefully offsets the cost of hiring them.
So what I'm hearing from you is probably similar to a lot of our younger listeners, is maintaining as much control as possible can be ideal perhaps initially when income is lower. We're trying to manage expenses in that savings capture type of spread, and perhaps when time is a more abundant resource for us. But as your world gets more complex, your time gets more limited, your priorities get spread across different purposes, really outsourcing or leveraging the capabilities and expertise of others starts to put a lot of dollars back in your world, whether it's directly on paper, either not making mistakes or finding more optimization, or perhaps not on paper, just spending more time in places where you actually feel that your cup is being filled. So if you were to rewind or to have a conversation with 25-year-old Michael, what would you tell him to consider doing differently in regards to this idea of the DIYer versus buying back some time?
I would say it would be get a little bit more comfortable with the unsettling feeling of paying that fee for that expert advice. Because there were countless times where I had, late nights into the early mornings of trying to figure out something myself, and projects just took longer than they needed to. Or being overconfident in my abilities to do a home project when I could have just hired a general contractor and got someone else to do it for me. Right. And having to take time off of work to be able to do this. And again, it's really a matter of how much do you value your time? What is your time valued or worth? And so I would tell myself that, hey, there is power in being able to offload this to someone else and allow them to stress over it and figure it out for you. But in doing so, it comes at a cost. And I have to be willing, and, I would just have to be able to accept that.
What other mistakes or things would you have done differently if you had looked back at yourself at 25 or 28 compared to where you are now?
I would take on a little bit more risk in general. So I think with how my late 20s and early 30s unraveled, I got married, started a family very quickly, transitioned into a new profession, started, building a business. So took on a lot of risk, had my wife go from being full-time to part-time. And we did not take on as much risk as I probably should have with buying our current home. We went the route of spending a little bit less money because there was just a lot of uncertainty with how the business was going to grow and perform. Hindsight, I should have accepted more of that pressure, because betting on myself is something that I've come to really lean into as someone who's very competitive and driven. And so hindsight, an extra $50,000 to $100,000 on a home purchase price really isn't that big of a deal versus what it felt like in the moment. And it was purely because of the uncertainty of the unknown. And so I would say it's taking on too little risk, because risk is where a lot of your reward can come from. I am just of the mindset that analysis paralysis can take over in my own personal world, and it holds me back from being able to make on-the-fly decisions.
Sure. And I think that's the sentiments that a lot of listeners in their 20s and 30s, and a lot of clients that we work with in their 20s and 30s have, is I don't feel very comfortable taking the leap into the unknown. And it's oftentimes that leap is what really sparks all of the upside potential or all of the reward potential from a longer term planning standpoint. It's hard to make that leap initially, but oftentimes looking backwards, it's much easier to say, I could have done this or should have done this years before I actually did.
Correct. Yeah, and again, time is very valuable. It's probably one of your greatest assets and commodities. And unfortunately, you don't get any back once it's wasted. So you definitely need to be mindful of that. What about you? What is one of your biggest, again, like you mentioned, not mistakes, but something that you wish that you would have handled differently in your 20s, being that you're in your early 30s now?
Yeah, so I think the challenge, and I'll put a financial lens on this because we're having a financial podcast discussion, but as a financial advisor, what my approach to planning looked like was typically optimizing for returns or perfection on paper, when my primary focus should have been optimizing income creation or potential. Right? What I told myself in my more corporate position was, hey, if I continue to earn at this capped level of income and make all of the perfect moves from a investment standpoint, an account standpoint, a saving standpoint, if I make all of the, in quotes, perfect moves, I'll end up ahead of ideally where a lot of others in my same income bracket would land because I'm making better moves on paper. Now being in my 30s, looking back, what I wish I had done differently was focus less on, hey, what very small levers am I pulling from a financial planning standpoint, and focus more on, hey, what is the biggest lever I could pull? It's go out and actually earn more income. Now, very similar to yourself, right? It was really just all about taking more risk. To leave corporate America and to leave the much more stable position, go off and try to build a business and a practice myself where I can pull the income lever and basically see almost unlimited upside from a business standpoint. Now, there's much less optimization that happens on paper. From a time standpoint and an opportunity cost standpoint, I don't have time to do all my taxes anymore. I don't have time to manage my portfolio day to day anymore. I don't have time to make everything perfect, right? That's where starting to outsource some of that responsibility has really begun to pay its dividends. But one of the biggest mistakes, regrets that I made was just kind of sticking too long in a position that didn't have as much upside potential and focusing on trying to fix that problem basically on paper.
Oh, Brady, well, I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that. And you're spot on. I think foundationally, you have to build some sort of firm setting for you to be able to jumpstart and accelerate and come out of the blocks quick, right? And then I think the systems that are built to support that can scale the accelerated growth that high-driven professionals, high-earning professionals will experience, right? And the idea is that you don't want there to be excessive waste. There might be some waste, but you don't want excessive waste. And so to highlight, again, we were talking about professionals in their 20s and 30s and 40s, and the big risks that we're seeing, we gave 5. So if I were to summarize this, I would, or I guess recap some of this and start to tie in some of these age-appropriate decades. I would say that some of the biggest mistakes by decade is that in the 20s, it's the foundation years, right? And this is where most people go wrong early. And it's, hey, they're not contributing enough to retirement accounts, especially 401k, and missing out on an employer match. Or it's contributing too much and not creating some sort of emergency fund. Overspending on housing too early and also on cars because they want to look glamorous, and having a very large lifestyle creep. So the underlying issues here is just lack of long-term thinking plus underestimating future impacts of those decisions, basically negotiating with your future self who you haven't met yet. If we transition 10 years into our 30s, this is more positioned as complexity and coordination years. By this point, a lot of professionals are married, maybe they're starting families, maybe they've changed their employers a couple times, and so it's not having adequate emergency funds. Again, that's either because they weren't saving due to lifestyle, keeping up with their peers, or everything was going into a retirement account, or being too hands-off with finances in general. And we've done episodes in the past where you get married and everyone's managing their finances as independent members of the family. Well, this is where I think there's an opportunity to level up when things are consolidated. So the underlying issue here is really just financial complexity increases over time, but the engagement level doesn't. It's just continuing to managing it at the same pace when in reality, you have to become more engaged, right? You have to become more aware of what's happening. And then if we transition into our 40s, this is, in my mind, framed as the optimization and protection years. And so the big mistakes here is just ignoring up to this point, because we ignored it in our 20s and our 30s, the overall need for adequate life insurance and disability income protection insurance, and not understanding the risk that could arise, or the financial devastation that could arise, if we don't button this up while we're younger and while we're healthier and while we're still insurable. And then letting old retirement accounts sit unmanaged. Again, not being engaged enough in our 30s and that carrying over into our 40s, knowing that we've probably changed our employers again over the course of the last decade or so. And the last piece is not increasing focus on retirement despite the proximity of how close we are. So the underlying issues in our 40s is just complacency plus the failure to actually optimize. So when you add all this together, again, to circle back and bring it full circle to the early on exercise, there is about a $4 million delta or difference or missed opportunity by just delaying, not saving a decade. Again, 20 years versus 30 years, starting at age 30 and ending at age 60 versus starting at age 40 and ending at age 60. All of the variables the same as far as the amount we're saving and our expected growth rate. That is a sizable opportunity lost. And if you take nothing else from this, I would say the earlier you can create some awareness, some clarity, and a game plan with automated systems that scale your wealth building potential, I would say you're heading down the appropriate path to where you could have the ability to make the decision of, hey, I don't no longer want to work past age 55 because that's my choice, versus being dependent on a paycheck at that point.
So I guess if there's one thing that we hope that you take away from the episode, is that mistakes are certainly part of the process, but repeating them doesn't have to be.
Your 20s and 30s are some of the most financially impactful decades of your life, not because of how much you make, but because of the decisions you make with what you have.
And the goal isn't perfection. It's progress with intention and purpose.
If you want help building a plan that avoids these mistakes and actually aligns your money with your life, head over to www.genesiswealthplanning.com/AMA and submit a question and or schedule a complimentary conversation.
And as always, if you found this episode helpful, share it with someone in their 20s or 30s.
Because this is the kind of episode that can change someone's financial trajectory. Are you considering hiring a financial advisor? If so, be sure to listen to episode 1 of Financial Fortitude. In this episode, we discuss the reasons why many people choose to hire a financial advisor and highlight the key qualities you should look for in the financial professional you decide to work with. Hypothetical examples are not intended to suggest a particular course of action or represent the performance of any particular financial product or security. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice. Although the information has been gathered from sources believed to be reliable, please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Genesis Wealth Planning LLC, and opinions stated are their own. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. All investments and investment strategies contain risk and may lose value. All scenarios and names mentioned herein are purely fictional and have been created solely for educational purposes. Any resemblance to existing situations, persons, or fictional characters is coincidental. The information presented should not be used as the basis for any specific investment advice. Michael Acosta and Brady are registered representatives and financial advisors of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS. Securities, products, and advisory services offered through Park Avenue Securities, member FINRA, SIPC. Financial representatives of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. Park Avenue Securities is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Consolidated Planning Group, Inc. and Genesis Wealth Planning, LLC are not affiliates or subsidiaries of Park Avenue Securities or Guardian. Michael Acosta's California Insurance License Number 0M50974 and Brady Hemmerly's California Insurance License Number 4353077.
7237198.36 expiration 428.